Mike, you're very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Really delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Brendan, it's a joy to be with you. And I wish people could have heard our pre-roll discussion. It's just a pleasure to connect with you.
Yes, well, we can share a little insight of that. As you know, I'm from Ireland, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning with you, and you shared with me that you're having an Irish coffee. So this is going to be a wonderful interview.
Right, we better go quickly. But you know what's funny? It's a regular coffee. I did speak at an event where they had me drink whiskey during the presentation. And they said if I was able to do 3 double shots of whiskey and maintain my presentation, they would make a donation to the charity of my choice in the tune of $5,000. So I did it. And what I did was I just took a quick shot right in the beginning and I started to feel it. I just did my whole speech. In the last 2 minutes, I did the last 2 shots and finished. So I gamed the system a little bit.
That's brilliant. You've just given me an idea to celebrate our 100th podcast episode. So I've got a bottle of whiskey in here. And yes, that's definitely a way to host the show. Anyway, I am very conscious of, it took a long time to get you on the show. I'm conscious of the time that we have. So I'm going to kick off with the question that I pose to all of our guests. Our vision, as you know, is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So Mike, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
So I think there's a common confusion between scaling and growing. And many entrepreneurs say they're scaling, but they're actually growing. And here's how I define it. Growth is achieving more results through more effort. Scaling is achieving more results through less effort. So the key, I think, to scaling with purposefully is to be very clear on the outcomes you want to achieve, how you want to serve your community, regardless if it's a broad community, that's what I'm serving, that's what you're serving, or if it's a narrow community, maybe it's a few individuals, but define how you want to serve them, but then to serve them as efficiently as possible. So for me, it's through writing books. My life's purpose is to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. But I don't do, when I started, by necessity, I did all the elements. I wrote the books, I marketed the books, I did everything. But as the business has grown, I consistently ask myself, how do I have the same level or higher level of impact with less of my participation? Because that's what scaling is. To the point where I only do maybe 20% of my own speaking, which sounds a little bit crazy, but for live events and so forth, I've now trained 40 or 50 people in delivering the keynotes that I've developed, and they're out doing it. It's of service to them, it's out of service to the communities, and I'm able to have a bigger impact on my purpose with less effort. That's what scaling is.
I love that. What a great answer. And you mentioned your own purpose there. It would be remiss of me before we get into your wonderful book, which I have here, Get Different. Simon Sinek said you are the top contender for the patron saint of entrepreneurs. So how did you come to have that wonderful accolade from Simon?
Yeah, from the mighty Simon Sinek.
Indeed.
Well, fortuitous circumstances helped. I met Simon prior to him writing Start With Why. And when I was writing my first book and he was writing that book, we actually worked collaboratively. He had a loft in New York City. We would meet at his suite and we would work on our books and conceptualize. And I remember, and here's the thing, videotape everything. I videotaped him saying this right before I was leaving one day. He said, hey, he says, you got my back, I'll get your back. He goes, anytime you get a speaking engagement and they ask who else could speak here, please tell them Simon Sinek. And Simon said, I'll do the same for you, Mike. He goes, anytime you need your back covered, I got you. I recorded it. We lost touch over 10 or 15 years. Thank God I kept that recording. So when I was writing my book, I reached out to him through his publicist and he was inaccessible. And they said, sorry, he doesn't do any endorsements, nothing. And I said, hey, just could you show him this one video? And it was the video of us having that conversation. Minutes later, I got an email back from him saying, dude, I got your back. And he gave me that glowing testimonial.
Oh, wow. Because he's very hot on integrity and being honest.
Extremely, extremely so. He's an extraordinary human being. And he's true to his word. And, you know, and kudos to him too. He powerfully says no, not insultingly, but powerfully. Yeah. You know, I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands of authors and people that are reaching out. Hey, Simon, could you endorse me? He's the number one name on their wish list for endorsements or some form of support. He has to say no, but he does it in a way that's not insulting. He says, listen, This is what I need to achieve. I have to decline these other things which become distractions for me. And he does it well.
Yeah, I heard him interviewed recently, actually, and he was speaking to that very subject of being able to say no without you feeling that you're offending somebody.
Mm-hmm.
He says we should learn this in school. But enough of Simon Sinek. I want to get into your wonderful book, Get Different, and we were sharing just before I came on air the fact that I have to face this book. It's an instructional guide to market in a different way. And this is very beneficial for me because my background is in marketing. So or in finance rather. I want to kick off. You've got this wonderful opening. 10 years ago, I made a vow. I will forever find ways to make every business owner on this planet aware of what I have, even if my competition is bigger or more established or has a boatload of money. Because I believe my offer is the best solution for my readers, I have a responsibility to make them aware. I will never again wait for anyone to find me. I will make them see me. You must make a vow to serve the members of your community by making them take notice. But a pledge is not enough. You must get past the biggest barrier to effective marketing: fear. Yeah. Just get into that a little bit more. What is
so? I've been since releasing that book, I've been traveling around and speaking with so many entrepreneurs about their marketing. And what's so interesting is most of us fall into the best practices of marketing. So we hear that our industry is doing something. So I'm an author. The best way to market your book is to do an email blast, get it on social media. And there's maybe 2 or 3 flavors of the year, and this is true for all industries. I was at a photographers conference recently. I keynoted to, I believe it was about 5,000 people in the room. It was a huge audience. It's one of those audiences. It's rare for me. Usually, are smaller audiences, but you can't see the whole room. It's so big. And I asked in the survey, I said, tell us about your marketing best practices. And we started writing them down. As a group of 5,000 people, we came up with 6 ideas that people were executing on. There was a lot of brainstorming, but really there was 6 ideas. Postcard mailing. Wow, that's a doozy, and all these different things. The key to effective marketing is to disrupt the pattern that the consumer is experiencing, the prospect. If everyone's mailing postcards, you're just another postcard. You're ignorable. So we have to differentiate. But the fear of differentiation is back to our cave dweller days. If I do something that's different, I could be ridiculed. You could make fun of me. I could be embarrassed. And in the caveman days, that means rejection from the tribe. If we're in the same tribe, you and I, and the decision of the tribe is to hunt for a woolly mammoth, and you're like, no, I'm going for a saber-toothed tiger. Who's in with me? And no one joins you. You are out in the tundra alone, and you'll be rejected because you can't be trusted. The tribe needs to go collectively for the woolly mammoth, so you will be rejected, which meant certain death. Our reptilian mind still equates differentiation with certain death. And so you feel this fear build up. I can't do that. What are people going to say? But, on the other side, I call it the angel. So the devil is don't do, but the angel is saying you have a responsibility to get noticed. If you are proud of what you've done, if you feel that your work has great impact, if you know you're of greater service to your clients than the competition, well, damn it, you have a responsibility to be noticed. And if you listen to the angel, it can overcome the fear. I'm not saying the fear is going to go away. There's no such thing as no fear, but you can squelch it enough just to get it out there. And the funniest thing, to put a wrap on this, is with my own marketing, I found I lean toward goofy and silly. That's just who I am. And when I do that, there is a community that says he's not for me, but they just go and find someone else. But then there's another community that says, thank God you made yourself present. You're my guy. And they're magnetized by it. The worst thing to do is to be this watered down nothing, a fake version of yourself. And maybe by pure happenstance that someone picks you up, someone notices you and engages your services or whatever you do. Now they're getting a phony you. And I think that's even worse. So by being different, it's the only way to get noticed. It's terrifying to do it. But once you do it, you'll find that you're revered for doing it by the right community.
We're completely aligned on this, and
I love it.
This speaks to our own purpose. And you may not know this, but in the UK, the stats are only 1% of small and medium-sized enterprises are actually achieving scale. So you have 5.7 million SMEs in the UK, contributing £2 trillion worth of revenue to the UK economy. Half of that is coming from 34,000 SMEs. Now, what is really interesting, speaking to what you've just mentioned on the marketing side, Mike, is the fact that lack of ambition is cited as the single greatest impediment as to why SME leaders don't scale. And that lack of ambition, I think you and I both agree on this, that's simply fear, because entrepreneurs don't lack ambition. So I want to get into this, you know, and you know, you've touched on it. Lots of us as people and as organizations are really great at doing things a little better, but not so many are great at doing things differently. And this is what your book speaks to. So you've created this lovely framework, the DAD framework. Yeah. So please step us through this. If we can have a little mini masterclass in this, Mike, it would be great.
Sure. So the DAD framework is a checklist. By the way, Brendan, I've heard every dad joke on the planet as a result. So this is like, I literally get an email probably every day, like, oh, have you heard this one? Yes, I have. So this is a checklist that you can use with your marketing. And my promise is if you check off each element, you've optimized your marketing. If you miss any element, you've crippled your marketing. There's no guarantee for success, but there's definitely a way to amplify your potential to have success. The first D stands for differentiate. It's what we've been focusing on. Is the human mind, there's a part of our mind or brain at the brainstem called the reticular formation. The reticular formation is a composite of multiple things. A lot of people talk about a part of it called the reticular activating system, the RAS. You know, you buy a car and then you see that car everywhere. That's the RAS. But the reticular formation is this network of neurons with its primary function to ignore almost everything. In fact, 99.99, it goes on for many nines, of stimuli around us, and it's happening right now, are ignored. Like, you and I are having a conversation, but the only way we can be engaged in a conversation is if I'm not looking at this little, you know, marker on my desk and engaged in this. So it's sitting there, it's present, it's seeking attention, but my mind says it's not relevant now. Well, the first step is in our marketing, we have to get through the reticular formation. There's only 3 ways through. Technique 1 is through threats. If we're talking and someone walks in with a knife, all of a sudden our mind will focus on that because it's a known threat. Now, the application to marketing is you can do threat marketing. I'm not sure how often this happens in the UK, but in the US, we get marketing sometimes in the mail that says there's a $100,000 fine if you open this letter and you're not the intended recipient. There's 10 days in jail. There's all these warnings. Sometimes you open a letter and it's a fake governmental form. It looks like it's from the government, but it's not. It's like you have to pay this, and it's nonsense. That's called threat marketing. What's interesting is it works in getting our attention, but threats cause retaliation. So we happily rip it up. We threaten to sue or whatever. So that marketing I wouldn't suggest doing. The next time of marketing that works is opportunity marketing. Opportunity is when a known benefit comes our way, the reticular formation opens up, it forwards it to the prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is conscious thought. And we say, oh, I've seen this before. It was valuable. Let me consume this again, but cautiously. Whenever we consume something that's a benefit, there's suspicion. Is there a trick to this? Why is someone doing this for me? What do they want? Is this a gimmick in reciprocity? And actually, you see this often. At least I get mail regularly where there's these return address stamps built into the envelope, and it says, hey, listen, here's a packet of 100 return envelope or stickers, and simply give us a $1,000 donation. We hope we deserve it. No, but I keep the stickers. Sometimes people even mail money, and I carefully peel that money off, but I'm not going to reciprocate. I consume with caution. So opportunity marketing also gets the attention of people, but we often are very suspicious of it. But the third way through the reticular formation, and the most effective, is through differentiation. When we do something unexpected, it both illuminates the amygdala, our fight or flight response mechanism, and the prefrontal cortex, effectively illuminating the entire brain. If you ever walk down the street and you've felt your head do that double look, like what was that? And you do that double check, you can't even prevent it. What your brain saw is a stimuli, something it hadn't seen before in that context. It's unexpected, and it forces engagement. So don't change your marketing because it's a best practice of some other industry or your industry. Change or modify your marketing to speak to and through the reticular formation. You have to be different. Break through the reticular formation. The second part of DAD, A, stands for attract. Once we had the brain illuminated and the prefrontal cortex is engaged, the amygdala is engaged, now we have to show very quickly, and this all happens, by the way, in tenths of a second. I call it the blink test. If you blink, it takes longer to blink than it does to bring about a conscious thought. The A stands for attract. It must speak and compel the audience. It must speak to their desires and interests in that moment. For example, first podcast, I could have dressed like a clown with a big red nose, that waka waka horn, and it is different. But, and everyone listening or watching would say, oh my God, look at the clown. But is it attractive? And it probably isn't. It doesn't speak to what the audience is interested in. So instantly they'll disregard it. So we have to speak to the audience. And what you want to do here is note the avatar you're speaking to and identify something that's a problem they have, speak that problem, a pain they have, or usually it's actually just engagement through entertainment or edutainment. That's why that's so effective. You see the commercials on television that are wildly successful usually are either comical, funny, or dramatic. There was one here in the United States. It was one of the most effective commercials for people wearing seatbelts. So some people, this has been a battle, but I think seatbelts became popularized in the 1950s or became available. But it was really until the 1960s or 70s where people actually started wearing it. People would say, I don't need to wear a seatbelt. I'm a good driver. But that was the kind of retaliation. So we're still in this campaign to get people to wear seatbelts. There was a commercial on television that had a young family. It was a man, wife, child. And you see this man, he's totally engaged. He's actually looking straight forward. And it looks like he's watching television. You can see his big smile. And his wife and child are sitting right next to him and they're smiling. And all of a sudden, his face goes from this engaged smile to like deep scare and concern. And you see his wife and daughter make the same face. And his wife leaps up and she wraps his arms from his shoulder down to his waist and clicks, if you will, her fingers together around his torso. His daughter leaps up and she wraps her fingers around his waist, making a seatbelt. And then you see the impact. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, he has this impact, but he's clamped in with them. And you see shards of glass and all stuff go around them. And then the commercial ends by saying, seatbelts don't just save lives, they save families. Wow. Yeah. Different. You don't see commercials like that. Attractive, meaning it spoke to the engagement and the interest of people. It wasn't just like, wear your seatbelt or get a ticket. It was something that was attractive and compelling. It was dramatic. So there has to be engagement for your avatar. But the last component is just as important. The last D stands for direct. We have to tell the prospect, now that they've seen this, what is the next action to take? In that commercial, it was click your seatbelt, put it on. Whenever we're selling something, the biggest mistake I see made is we leave this obtuse, kind of confusing message like, hey, thanks for your interest in our stuff. Hope you want to learn more. On our websites, if there's anything you should got to remove, it's that button that says learn more. The whole reason people go to your website is to learn more. So don't put us in that circuitous pattern. The other thing is sometimes it's too acute, too big of an ask. We say, put down a multi-$1,000 deposit so we can have a conversation and people will leave. So this is the Goldilocks situation. We need to have it just right. There has to be an exchange. So maybe it's like, give me your email and I'll provide something of value. With your email, I have permission to contact you again, and then we can matriculate them. The last little component I want to share about this is the direct has to be in relation to the size of the offer. For me, I sell books. A book costs $25 US. It's pocket change for many people. And in that case, for me to draw out the sequence, give me your email. Now let's do this. And then now buy the book is actually ineffective. It's better for me to have a differentiation, stand out, an attractor factor, speak to what the audience needs. For me, it's the simplification of entrepreneurship for my readers, and then say, let's take action right now, buy the book. It's a small enough ask. It's the bigger asks that you often have to take steps to get there.
I love the simplicity of that framework and the impact of it as well. And I've worked through it, and there's a number of things I want to pick up on. how do we, and you mentioned it at the outset, how do we differentiate but continue to be authentic? So essentially what we're saying is, look, we want to move beyond this fear barrier to do something that's different.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, look, wearing a clown uniform, it's just, I don't feel right in that. And whilst it's very different. So how do we get it different, but also authentic? Have you seen
that? And that actually is the key, because different for different sake is a failure point. There was a quote attributed to Oscar Wilde. I'm not sure if he said it, but this phrase is, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Right. I love that. He's an Irish bloke. Isn't he?
Is. I love that quote. Yeah.
So here's what we do. Getting different, becoming different means becoming different from the market. It doesn't mean you being different. In fact, it's an amplification of who you naturally are already. Here's one technique to do it. I would invite anyone listening in right now, reach out to past friends, acquaintances back from the school days. Maybe you haven't talked to them in 10, 15, or 20 years or longer. Reach out to them and say, hey, what do you think makes me different? I was listening to this podcast and this weird author guy said, I got to ask, what do you remember about me? Then ask that same question to acquaintances that you know today. And collectively, maybe you want to ask up to about 10 people. You'll often find a pattern. For me, when I did this, people said to me, Mike, you were able always to get to the essence. We'd have conversations and so forth, and you got the essence and were able to present simply. So it's like, oh, simple presentation is part of it. Mike, you were able to bring humor through self-deprecation. Okay, self-deprecation. And I figured out there was 4 or 5 common themes. I was like, oh, that's it. All my marketing messaging has to be simple, and it has to leverage self-deprecation. People, the right, quote unquote, right people, the people that resonate with me, like the silliness factor. So I got to play that up, but from a self-deprecating, not ever pointing at someone else. And that became the marketing. So I leaned into it. The thing is, you lean to a certain point, and very quickly, the more you lean into it, you'll notice you pass a barrier where no one else is doing it. So people come, for example, to my website and like, oh my gosh, I've never experienced a website like this. There's little golden goose eggs hidden in there. One of the favorites on my website is you can choose, I like Mike or I hate Mike. And when you click on I hate Mike, it sends you to an anger management course that you have to go through. But these little goose eggs, it speaks to the nature of who I am. And yet my contemporaries don't do it because hopefully they're doing their own version different, which is wonderful. But sadly, most are just watered down to replicate others, and therefore they'll never get noticed.
I love that. Just getting in, because you've used maybe some marketing speak, and I want to bring it right back to kind of getting into this. The 7th principle of our ScaleX framework is proposition, and you spoke to that within attract. Yeah. And you talked about the avatar, but I want you to explain to the listeners who may not be familiar with avatar or customer personas, what that is, and then also how they should go about understanding the value that they actually bring to their customers in terms of the problem they solve or the need that they service. Not what they think it is, but actually what it actually is.
And that's a big difference. Thinking, guessing, and knowing.
Yeah.
So the avatar, how I define it, well, a common definition is the ideal client, but how I define it is the who, what, and when. It's a combination of 3 things. So there's a popular phrase, who, what, and when. I'm changing it to who, what, and when. The who is identify the individual, who is the ultimate consumer. And if you sell to a large company, you're not selling to a large company, you're selling to the individuals within a large company. So we need to define them at the human level and get as much detail about them. The classic definition is know them better than they know themselves, know their interests, and so forth. And one simple way to do this, if you have historical clients, look at your best historical clients and interview them. Call them, say, hey, tell me about yourself. I want to be able to serve you better. Now, one thing to avoid is to call your historical clients and say, hey, I'm looking for more clients just like you. Tell me about yourself, because that triggers what's called dilution. Dilution is where you're less available for your clients and they're dissuaded from helping you because you're not going to be as available for them. But instead, we want to bring concentration by saying, I want to learn more about you to serve you better. The side benefit is you're going to learn about them and therefore be able to attract other people like them. So that's the who. The what is, what are they truly buying from you? I was working with a association, it was the Chimney Cleaners Association. I just kind of laugh here because they had a real difficult challenge. No one knows they need their chimney cleaned, like ever. Like I suspect if you have a chimney, you don't stick your head up and say, oh, it's dirty now. Like you just don't know. So you can't tell if you need it cleaned. When they do clean it, you can't tell if they didn't work because it's inside something you can't see. Yeah. And their mascot may also be Irish, is Mary Poppins. Was she Irish?
I'm not sure if she was.
I think I'm going to say she was. And she stole your children. She'd go to your window and take your children outside their window. Like that was their challenge. And they weren't attracting business. So what we had to do was understand what they were really selling. They weren't selling clean chimneys. They were selling roaring fires. That's the benefit. You don't sell the feature, sell the benefits. What does the avatar really want? And speak to that. So when they were doing different, and we came up with a different strategy for them. I can share that later if you're interested. But we came up with a different strategy for them. The attractor factor wasn't clean chimney, which all the competition was talking about. Their factor was a roaring fire that happens to be super safe. But it was the roaring fire that people wanted to experience without any concern. So that's the who and the what. And the win is, what is the outcome that you want? Often we think about just the customer, and that's important, but what's the outcome that we need from this situation? And so define that win. In some of our marketing, the win is the final transaction. I intend for someone to buy my book, and I can work back from that. What are they benefiting from the book? It's not reading a business book. It's that their marketing is going to be improved significantly, or whatever that what is. And who is the reader? So I reverse engineer it. But sometimes the win is simply the next step. I just need to get their email address and their permission to communicate with them. And then once I have that, I'll have a new marketing campaign, the next sequence in it, that now moves that email address to the next transaction I want to achieve.
I love that. That's a great explanation, and it speaks to our seventh principle proposition. In terms of experimenting with kind of moving beyond that existing fear that we may have of gone. I'm dealing with CEOs, and they aren't even represented on LinkedIn because they are so fearful about putting themselves out there. So, this is where, in some instances, we're starting from. So how important is it to experiment from a marketing perspective? And, how should business leaders go about that? And especially in a cost-effective way. We don't want to be kind of off spending 6 months experimenting in the marketing when really we need to fill a program next week.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. But we also don't want to commit to one marketing idea that fails and we invest heavily in it.
Yes.
That's the most common. So the most common is that we go into an opportunity with a marketing plan. And I have nothing against plans. I just think a plan is the second step, and we're skipping the first step. The definition of plan means commitment. I plan to do Facebook ads. I'm committed to it. And the retort when it's failing is, oh, you're simply not doing enough. Your ads aren't working. You need to pay more. You need to lean into it more. But what we want to do prior actually is experiments. Experiments, the definition of that is learning. It may work, it may fail, but an experiment is expected learning. So experiments we need to do with small subsets of our target audience where we achieve statistical significance. What I mean by this is we run a test. For example, I'm going to do a new marketing plan. Everyone else in my competition is doing postcards, mailing out their new service. I'm going to try a billboard. And that's my unique idea. And I know you've heard of billboards and everyone's done it, but if no one's done it in my industry, it could qualify as different. Maybe no one's seen it.
Yeah.
Then what I do is I figure out how big is the ultimate audience I have. Say there's 10,000 prospects, and the ideal probabilistic or statistical probabilities are achieved when you have 10% of a subset. So if there's 10,000 potential, 1,000 people targeted will actually give you the likely outcome, the highly likely outcome for the entire set. So if there's 1,000 buy nothing, no one's going to buy anything. If they buy at a rate of 20%, it's likely everyone else will buy a rate at 20%. But even that may be a little expensive. So I was talking with statisticians, and what I found is the lowest test group ever is about 100 people. So if you got to go to bare bones, at least do 100 instances. And sadly, when it comes to small business, I see people like doing one instance and then they say, oh, that's the result. So I was talking with someone who did an old school mail campaign, but none of their competition does it. So it was different. They sent out 3 mailers and they had a hit rate of 2 people buying from them and 1 didn't. They said, oh my gosh, this is the amazing solution I'm looking for. I have a 60 or 70% close rate. Nothing touches with this. We're going to buy 1,000 mailers and send them out. They sold 1 more from that, and it was devastating to them because that's not statistical probability. A data set of 1 is not a data set. We need to get there. So test out your ideas. The other thing is you want to have as low cost as possible, spend as little money as possible and a little time as effort to test out your ideas. There's that concept of a minimum viable product. We're going to do minimum viable marketing here. Test out minimally and see what the results are. And I'll give you one last example is right behind me, if you're watching the video, is a tree with my books in it. That's a result of a marketing experiment. First thing I did, and we all need to do, is figure out what is the norm or the standard that everyone else is using for marketing. That is habituated. The reticular formation is blocking out. That's the ineffective stuff. I noticed that my contemporaries, all of them had bookshelves with their books presented behind them. Every author is like, okay, that's the one way not to get a book noticed because that's what everyone's doing. So then I said, okay, I can't do that, but I do want to display my books. I want people engaging in the books. So what I started to do was getting rid of the bookshelf. I started changing it and I started measuring audiences. And how I did it was real simple. Through webinars in the chat, I wouldn't say a word about it, but I just see what people would say. I once had a book swinging back and forth. I put it like on a noose and people noticed, but it wasn't attractive. They're like, that's so effing distracting. Yeah. And then this idea came for a tree like this. And I got a small mock-up version of it and tested out. And I noticed people saying, oh, that's pretty cool. The guy has a tree behind him. And someone called it the tree of knowledge. I was like, oh, that's cool. So then I invested in this this is maybe a 10-foot tall tree here behind me. And I invested in this and it's been a very successful marketing system. Now, the interesting thing, dad is there. It's different. How often do you see a tree behind an author? It's attractive, meaning it engages people out of curiosity. That's a big attractor factor. And the direct is implied. I simply want people looking at his book titles and saying, oh, check out the books the guy has, and maybe going to their bookstore or Amazon to check it out. So it's an implied direct.
You've just given me a great idea to market our own book. So thank you so much for that.
Are you going to do the noose swinging back and forth?
I don't know if I'll do the noose, but
don't do that.
A nice version of the tree. You've just prompted me. I've got real trees out the back. I need to maybe hang books from those. So
that would be interesting.
That's definitely different.
Yeah.
So brilliant. Well, look, we were chatting off air. As I mentioned, my background's finance. The finance people are always going to say, well, that's all great. We can try billboards, but it's going to be hugely expensive, all of that good stuff. How important is it to measure the return from our investment in our marketing experiments and efforts?
Yeah, measuring's everything. And I misunderstood. I thought you didn't have a background in finance. Now I'm hearing it correctly. Ironically, I went to university for finance and that was my major. And I stink at it. I don't focus on that. And that's the common approach, but measurement is critical because otherwise we're left to our cognitive bias. We trust our feel and gut. And this is something I'm trying to retaliate against, this common feeling or belief that just trusting your gut and instinct is the way to grow a business. Now, here's the problem. It does work in the very early stages because you don't have any data. When you have no data, the best thing to rely on is what you feel is the right thing to do. It'll at least get you in the general course. But there's a certain point where we're trusting our gut when the data shows something else, and that's stopping our business. In fact, I would say the biggest impedance to marketing success is not knowing what marketing is working. The biggest impedance is not looking at the numbers. So it's absolutely critical that you have the metrics. And I'm very fortunate. I own a few businesses and I'm just pointing behind me because down from this building, we have another building down the street where we run one of our organizations. And in that building, my partner and the president of our company, he came to us and said, the reason our business is struggling is that, or not struggling, is not achieving the next level, is that we have problems with retention. I just know that that people join us, but they're not staying as long as they could. So we got to focus on retention. Well, we pulled the numbers, and I said, all right, I said, just prove it through the numbers. And we pulled the numbers, and we found out our retention was the best ever. In our 7-year history, we actually were at the best levels ever. The problem was our conversion. People were coming on and just weren't convinced to join our organization. And by looking at the numbers, and I wasn't trying to insult or hurt him. What I did with him, and I do with myself, is I say, prove it. Anytime I say, I feel, or I believe, or this is what we need to do, I back it with the words, prove it, even including myself. Now I got to look at the numbers and get to it. And we changed the focus of the organization on conversion. And sure enough, the organization now is broken through that next glass ceiling and is moving forward again. So the numbers are everything.
And the numbers really to back up that intuition you have to begin with, but
or challenge it.
Yeah, or to challenge it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because watch the bias. This is what I do. You know, I believe something to be true, and I only look for the data that supports that. So if I believe our problem is retention, I'll look for the instances where I can point to it. So when I say prove it, what we want to do is look for the numbers that counter what we believe to be true, but also support it, and then find where the balance really is.
Yeah, that's great. And it's
not easy, by the way.
No, I was going to say it's such a skill to be able to do that because
because we admit our intuition's wrong.
Yeah, and
it's painful for me to even say it.
And it's intelligent listeners to our show who can rationalize and justify anything with data. So I think that's a really important point here to either prove or disprove, but provide the objective measurement to do that and be prepared to act on that data. So there's a really interesting, it's a paradox at the back of the book. It was an insight you had gleaned from a guy called Joey Coleman.
Yeah.
And I mean, this show is all about encouraging SMEs to scale with purpose. And there's this paradox. He says, do what doesn't scale because no one else will do it.
Right.
So tell me more about that.
I know. It was genius. And it also sounds like so counterintuitive. So I was having a call with him. He wrote a book called Never Lose a Customer Again. It's an extraordinary book. I highly recommend it. And he's just an extraordinary human being. And so I was talking with him, and he goes, I found the greatest way to differentiate my business. Now, this is not in the marketing per se. It's in the services or products, is to do the thing that no one else is willing to do. And so whatever is not scalable is what no one else is willing to do. But the thing he said, and I didn't put this in the book, is everything is scalable.
Yes.
What I found, and I employ this in my own business, every person that emails me, and I do probably get an email every 10 minutes from a reader around the clock. I have found a way to respond personally to every single one. And it requires a team, but I write every single note, or I send a video to every single person. And it requires a highly organized system, but we found it. And what I found is, I don't know of any of my contemporaries who will engage with every single reader. You'll go into their funnel, you'll get the generic emails. How do we do personal engagement? And so that's what we found. And that's been wildly impactful. And that was inspired in part by Joey Coleman's comment.
And you speak to our fifth principle within our ScaleX framework, processes and systems. And it's so critically important that you have these systems in place in order to ensure that your marketing is effective. I'm conscious of time, but we always pose this question in closing to all of our guests. You have had an immense career, the author of how many? It's 6 books now.
It's actually, I think it's 8. I wrote a children's book, and
right. Okay. So I have 3 of them. So just incredible. Profit First, and another wonderful book. So I dispute that you're not a finance professional, or certainly you're not financially competent, having read Profit First. But can you share with our audience, Mike, 3 timeless takeaways given the career that you've had to date?
Yeah, I love to. I think the first thing comes to mind is never go it alone, particularly when you are alone. And that sounds almost impossible. But when you are that solopreneur, when you're in the very early stages, surround yourself with people that will help you. I'm not necessarily saying that one mentor who has all the answers. What I did when I started my first business is I wanted to be really good at sales, and I found someone who was good at sales and just met with them regularly. I knew someone that was really good at managing their time. That was actually probably the greatest lessons I got. They found balance. His name was Silas, and I would work with him on just finding that balance. There was another guy who's just great on strategy. And there was a woman I started working with because I wanted to understand the female perspective of running a business. So I built this little network. And if you can't even build that, I call it the heavenly network of mentors. Find those people. I have it in my own office still, not this one, my home office, but I have all these pictures of people I admire. Oscar Wilde's one of them on my wall. And when I have a consideration, I'm like, what would Oscar Wilde say about this? And what would Michael Gerber is another one. There's a few other people up there. And so that's a technique I use.
I love that.
I think the second thing is be unabashedly yourself. Realize that a business is a platform of expression for ourselves, first and foremost. And I've had businesses where I built a business to cater to the customer, but I wasn't true to myself. And I started to loathe those companies. There's a concept that's popular called pivoting. And I don't like that term. I want to tweak it because pivot by definition says speak to the customer's interests. If they're not satisfied, keep adjusting your offering until they start buying. That's a pivot. But I've pivoted my own businesses and I've seen other people do this into something that they don't like doing. So instead of pivoting, align, be true to yourself, an application yourself and to what the customer wants and stay in alignment. And that's a business that will have legs. And the last part is bigger is not better. I used to believe that you had to have the next, fill in the blank, Amazon, Google, whatever you want, that was success. And now I realize, oh my gosh, the right business will find you. Collectively here between my companies, I have 20 plus employees, 21, 22. We might be the right size. I think maybe we'll grow a little bit more, but I want to know everyone intimately. I want to be friends with everyone here. And I'm loving the business. So why just grow it for growth's sake? I don't think any of us need to do that. Let the right size business find you.
Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to
Likewise,
you.
brother.
Last 3/4 of an hour. That Irish coffee has served you well, my friend. So if people want to reach you, Mike, and learn more about the wonderful work that you're doing, where best to connect with you?
The best place to go is my website, which is MikeMichalowicz.com, but no one can spell that. So here's something different. Go to Mike Motorbike. Mike Motorbike's a nickname I had in grade school. It was the only G-rated nickname. There's a lot of other ones, but I can't repeat them. So I bought MikeMotorbike.com, thank God. And if you go there, all my books are there, free chapter downloads. I used to write for the Wall Street Journal for many years. You can get those articles. Plus I have my own podcast, MikeMotorbike.com.
Brilliant. And before I let you go, what's next for you, young man? What's in the offing?
Well, tomorrow morning, I'm heading to the studio to record the revised and expanded edition of Clockwork. And then I'm also I have been contracted to write my next book on employee engagement. That's coming out in 2023.
Well, look, I wish you all the very, very best with that. You've been absolutely selfless with your service to the entrepreneurial community, and continue doing your great work.
It's been a joy. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks so much, Mike. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.